London, the spring of 1817. The ballroom of Pemberton House blazed with candlelight, each flame reflected in the crystal chandeliers until the very air seemed to vibrate, thick with the frivolous promise of the evening. The air was heavy with the mingled perfume of beeswax roses and the faint musk of exertion, while the music of the chamber orchestra rose and fell in feverish waves. Julian Montclair, Duke of Ashbourne, stood at the edge of the dance floor, his champagne glass forgotten in his hand. His dark eyes, usually so controlled, so measured in their aristocratic indifference, were fixed on a single figure with an intensity that bordered on violent. Miss Octavia Sinclair, his Livy, his oldest friend, his constant companion since they were children running wild through the gardens of Grenville Park, was smiling up at Sir Philip Davenport with an expression Julian had never seen on her face before. The simplicity of her ivory gown, unadorned by comparison to the elaborate silks and satins surrounding her, made her presence strangely more vivid. The curve of her exposed collarbone, the soft line of her nape where her brown hair was pinned, features he had known by heart since childhood, were suddenly the most arresting details in the entire glittering assembly. Her hand rested in Philip's with easy comfort. Her grey eyes, magnified slightly behind her spectacles, sparkled with genuine happiness. The shock hit Julian in the solar plexus, a silent blow, and for a moment he gripped his champagne glass as though he feared falling from a precipice. If stories of love hidden in plain sight move your heart, subscribe now and join us on this journey. You won't want to miss what happens next. The revelation struck him with the force of a cavalry charge. He was jealous, savagely, irrationally, devastatingly jealous, and not with the protective concern of a brother watching his sister court. No, this was the panic of a man who only perceived the value of a treasure when he saw the map of possession in another's hand. He loved Octavia Sinclair. The knowledge crashed over him with the weight of undeniable truth, or rather, the knowledge he had been too cowardly to acknowledge for 10 years. He loved the way she wrinkled her nose when she disagreed with something in a book. He loved how she laughed, truly laughed, without artifice, at his terrible jokes. He loved that she challenged him, that she knew him better than anyone, that she had seen him at his worst during his rakish years and had never turned away. He perceived now, with devastating clarity, that he had called her sister, not to protect her, but to protect himself, from the intensity of his own feelings, from a vulnerability that had terrified him since his father's death when he was 10 years old, and Octavia had held his hand while he sobbed and promised never to tell anyone. "Your Grace?" Lady Felicity Beaumont's musical voice intruded on his thoughts. She stood beside him, beautiful and perfect in emerald silk, her golden hair arranged in elaborate curls, his intended bride. The woman he had been courting for 3 months with the methodical precision of a man checking items off a list. Title, fortune, beauty, impeccable breeding, Lady Felicity possessed every quality society deemed essential in a duchess. Yet standing beside her, Julian realized with sickening certainty, made him feel like the Duke of Ashbourne, irreproachable, secure, empty. Standing beside Octavia made him feel like Julian, the flawed man she saw without judgment, and that had always been terrifying. "Forgive me, Lady Felicity," he said automatically, though his gaze never left Octavia. "I was distracted." Felicity followed his line of sight, and something cold flickered across her lovely features. "Oh, Miss Sinclair, how unexpected to see her accepting a waltz, and with a widower no less, though I suppose at 24 with no other prospects, one cannot be too particular." The casual cruelty in her tone made Julian's jaw tighten. How many times had he heard such remarks about Octavia over the years? Too intellectual, too plain, too bookish, too serious. Society had dismissed her as a confirmed spinster since her 2nd season at the age of 20. And he, God help him, he had done nothing to defend her, had perhaps even contributed to her invisibility by treating her as nothing more than a comfortable companion, a friend, a sister, never as a woman, never as someone he could love. Except he did love her. He had loved her for 10 years, and he had been too much of a coward to admit it. until another man had shown him exactly what he stood to lose. The waltz ended. Philip bowed over Octavia's hand with unmistakable tenderness, and she blushed, actually blushed in response. Julian felt his control, that legendary Montclair composure, begin to fray at the edges. "If you will excuse me, Lady Felicity," he said abruptly, "I must speak with Miss Sinclair." He did not wait for her response. He was already moving through the crowd, his purpose singular and absolute. Octavia saw him approaching and her expression shifted, the warm smile fading into something more guarded, more careful. The way she always looked at him now, as if she were protecting herself from something he could not name. But he knew now. She was protecting herself from him. "Livy," he said, reaching her side just as Philip was taking his leave, "I must speak with you, privately." Her grey eyes met his through her spectacles, those same spectacles she had worn since she was 14, when she had finally admitted she could not see the blackboard in their shared lessons. He had teased her mercilessly then, called her little owl, made her laugh until she could barely breathe. When had she stopped laughing at his jokes? "I am engaged for the next dance, Julian," she said quietly. "Perhaps later. Now, Livy." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Please." Something flickered in her eyes, hurt perhaps or resignation, but she nodded. "Very well. The library then. It will be quieter." She preceded him through the crowd, her simple ivory gown a stark contrast to the elaborate creations surrounding them. Octavia had never been one for fashion or frivolity. She spent her pin money on books, not bonnets. Read philosophy when other young ladies studied fashion plates. Preferred the solitude of libraries to the crush of drawing rooms. All the things that made her perfect, all the things he had taken for granted. The library at Pemberton House was blessedly empty, lit only by a few scattered candles. The familiar scent of old leather and parchment wrapped around them, a scent that always reminded Julian of Grenville Park, of lazy afternoons reading side by side in the estate library, of Octavia explaining Plato to him, while he pretended to be more interested in his book than in the way candlelight caught in her brown hair. God, how had he been so blind? No, how had he been such a coward? "What is it, Julian?" Octavia asked, turning to face him. She kept her distance, he noticed, kept the width of a reading table between them. "Is something wrong? Is your mother unwell?" Always thinking of others, always considerate even when he did not deserve it. "Sir Philip Davenport," he said abruptly, "you are encouraging his suit." It was not a question. Her spine straightened, and for the first time in their long friendship, he saw genuine anger flash in her eyes. "I am," she said evenly. "Is there some reason I should not? He is a gentleman of good character, comfortable means, and genuine intelligence. He has been nothing but respectful in his attentions. He is 16 years your senior, and you are 30 to my 4 and 20. Shall I comment on the age difference between you and Lady Felicity? She is barely 20, I believe." The barb struck true, and Julian felt heat rise to his face. "That is different. How?" She took a step forward, and he saw her hands were trembling. "How is it different, Julian? Because I am plain Miss Sinclair, fortunate to receive any attention at all, because at 4 and 20 I should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection come my way." "Livy, no." "Do not call me that." Her voice broke slightly. "Not tonight. Not when you are standing here engaged to another woman, questioning my right to pursue happiness simply because it makes you uncomfortable." She was right. She was absolutely right. And he was a fool, a blind, selfish fool who had wasted 10 years they could have had together. "I am not engaged to Lady Felicity," he said quietly. "Not formally. There has been no announcement, no understanding with her father. But there will be." Octavia's voice was flat. "Everyone knows it, Julian. You have been courting her all season. She will be a perfect duchess. Beautiful, accomplished, everything you could want. Everything society says I should want." He moved around the table, closing the distance between them. "But not everything I do want. Not even close." She backed away, shaking her head. "Do not do this. Do not. Julian, I cannot bear it if you are doing this out of some misguided sense of fraternal concern. I am not your sister. I am not your responsibility. I am a grown woman making my own choices. You are not my sister." The words came out fierce, definitive. "You have never been my sister, Livy. I was just too much of a coward to admit what you really are to me." Her breath caught. In the dim candlelight, her face was suddenly unbearably dear, every familiar feature now precious, now vital. How many times had he looked at this face and seen only comfort, only safety? When had he stopped seeing the woman and started seeing only the friend? When had he become so adept at lying to himself? "What am I to you, Julian?" she whispered. "Because for 10 years I have been the girl who waited, the girl who hoped, the girl who loved you in silence while you pursued every other woman in London except me. And now, when I have finally found the courage to let someone else care for me, you stand here and what? Ask me to wait longer? To hope that someday, perhaps, you might see me as something more than a convenient companion?" 10 years. She had loved him for 10 years. The knowledge hit him like a physical blow. While he had been carelessly calling her sister, treating her like a comfortable piece of furniture in his life, she had been quietly breaking her heart over him. And he had never noticed, had never bothered to look beyond his own comfortable delusions to see the truth standing right in front of him. No. That was another lie. He had noticed. Some part of him had always known. He had seen it in the way she smiled at him, in the way she always saved a dance for him at balls, in the way she remembered his favorite books and his least favorite foods, and the exact way he took his tea. He had known, and he had pretended not to, because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging his own feelings, would mean risking the most important relationship in his life, would mean being vulnerable in a way he had not been since his father's death. "Livy," he breathed. "I knew. I have always known. I was simply too much of a coward to admit what I felt, what I have felt for 10 years. Of course you did not know." A single tear slipped down her cheek, and she brushed it away impatiently. "I made certain you would not, because I knew I have always known that you do not love me, not the way I love you. You love your life exactly as it is, comfortable, uncomplicated, with your dear friend Livy always available to listen to your troubles, to laugh at your jokes, to be whatever you need her to be, except the one thing I actually want to be." "And what is that?" His voice was rough. "Yours." The word hung in the air between them, raw and honest. "I want to be yours, Julian. Not your friend, not your confidant, not your sister, yours. The way Lady Felicity will be yours, the way you will never let me be." Before he could respond, before he could tell her that she was already his, had always been his, if he had only been brave enough to claim her, the library door opened. Lady Felicity stood in the doorway, her beautiful face cold with barely concealed fury. "How touching," she said, her voice like ice wrapped in honey. The Duke and his little charity case, alone, in a library, during a ball. I wonder what society would make of such a cozy scene. Octavia went pale. Julian felt rage, clean and absolute, course through his veins. "Lady Felicity, you will apologize to Miss Sinclair immediately." "I will do no such thing." Felicity stepped into the room, her silk gown rustling. "I have been remarkably patient, Your Grace. Patient while you spent hours closeted with this person. Patient while you brought her to events as if she were some sort of mascot. Patient while half of London whispered about your unseemly attachment to your companion, Miss Sinclair, whose only pedigree is her father's kindness. But I will not be humiliated. You will choose, right now. Me, and the future society expects of you. Or her, and the scandal that will surely follow." The voice of his father echoed in Julian's mind, all those lessons about duty and honor, and the weight of the title. For 30 years he had lived according to those principles, had made every choice based on what was expected, what was proper, what was safe. But duty had never felt so cold. The entire world that Felicity represented, the world of his title, his position, his carefully constructed life, seemed grey and lifeless when compared to the warmth and colour of Octavia's presence. It was not really a choice at all. "Then I choose scandal," Julian said quietly. "Miss Sinclair, would you do me the honor of waiting here while I speak with Lady Felicity? I believe our understanding, such as it was, requires immediate clarification." He saw Octavia's eyes widen behind her spectacles, saw hope and fear war in her expression. But before she could speak, Lady Felicity laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "You fool," she said, "you absolute fool. You would throw away everything, your reputation, your position, your mother's good opinion for her. A woman who will be forgotten the moment you walk away, who has been forgotten already, every season since she came out." "No," Octavia said suddenly, her voice stronger than Julian had ever heard it. "He will not throw away anything for me, because I will not allow it." She looked at Julian, and the pain in her eyes nearly broke him. "You called me your sister for 10 years, Julian. You do not get to decide in one evening that I am suddenly something more, not because another man showed interest, not because jealousy made you see me differently. I deserve better than that. I deserve to be someone's first choice, not their sudden realization, not their panic response." "Livy, please." "Octavia," she corrected gently. "My name is Octavia, and I am going to leave now. I am going to return to the ballroom, where Sir Philip is waiting for me, where a good man wants me for exactly who I am, not for who I suddenly became when another man wanted me first." She walked past Lady Felicity, past Julian, her head held high despite the tears now streaming freely down her face. The door closed behind her with quiet finality, and Julian heard in that soft click the sound of a woman who had finally chosen herself over the man who had taken her for granted for a decade. The cut in his heart was proof that she had finally learned to value herself more than she valued his love. Lady Felicity's cold voice cut through his thoughts. "I suppose congratulations are in order, Your Grace. You have just destroyed your reputation for a woman who does not even want you. How very romantic, how very stupid." She swept from the room, leaving Julian alone in the library that smelled of old books and ruined futures. He had lost her. After 10 years of having Octavia as his constant, his comfort, his home, he had lost her. And the worst part, the absolutely unbearable part, was that he had lost her through his own cowardice. For 10 years, she had loved him. And for 10 years, he had been too much of a coward to admit he loved her back. The thought of Octavia marrying Philip Davenport, of watching her build a life with another man, of losing even the friendship he had taken so carelessly for granted. It was unbearable, impossible. But the thought of forcing her to choose him, of using her feelings against her, of asking her to risk scandal and censure simply because he had finally pulled his head out of his aristocratic arse, that was worse. She deserved better. She had always deserved better. And if he truly loved her, which he did with a certainty that left him shaking, then he would prove it, not with grand gestures or passionate declarations, but with patience, with respect, with the daily unglamorous work of showing her that she was not a sudden realization or a jealous impulse. She was everything, and he was going to spend however long it took making certain she knew it. The next morning, Julian woke before dawn. The fear of losing Octavia, a physical, visceral fear that sat in his chest like a stone, pulled him from bed faster than any ducal responsibility ever had. He lay in the darkness of his bedchamber at Ashbourne House, the familiar sounds of servants beginning their morning routines filtering through the walls, and contemplated the shadow he had become. A man of title without honor, a duke hollow at his core, a coward, a man who had hidden behind duty and propriety and comfortable lies for 10 years, a man who had used a good woman's steadfast love as a safety net while he played at being the perfect duke, courting suitable ladies who bored him within minutes of conversation, maintaining a life that looked impeccable from the outside while feeling hollow within. He thought of his father, who had died when Julian was 18 and freshly titled. The late Duke had been a man of principle, of honor, of unwavering dedication to responsibility. But he had also been a man who loved Julian's mother with a passion that defied social convention. She had been the daughter of a gentleman farmer, far beneath him in station, and he had married her anyway and never regretted it for a moment. What would his father say if he could see Julian now? Would he be proud of the Duke who had maintained the estate's prosperity, increased its holdings, taken his seat in Parliament with due diligence? Or would he be disappointed in the man who had been too afraid to follow his heart, too concerned with appearances to claim the woman he loved? Julian knew the answer. His father had taught him about duty, yes, but he had also taught him through example that real duty meant being true to oneself, that a man's worth was not measured by his title or his holdings, but by the courage to live authentically. He had lost the title of respectable man in one evening at Pemberton House. Lady Felicity would make certain all of London knew he had humiliated her. His reputation would suffer. His mother would field uncomfortable questions. The gossips would have a field day. And none of it mattered, not when weighed against the possibility of losing Octavia forever. He would do the work, the hard, unglamorous daily work of proving himself worthy, not through grand gestures that faded as quickly as they impressed, but through consistency, through showing up, through putting her needs before his own comfort, through being vulnerable in a way he had never allowed himself to be, not since childhood, not since his father's death, when he had learned that showing weakness could be terrifying. Julian rose from bed with a sense of purpose that felt foreign in its intensity. For 30 years he had drifted through life with the comfortable assumption that everything would simply fall into place because he was a duke, because he did what was expected, because he played by the rules. But Octavia would not fall into place. She would have to be earned, and earning her would require him to become someone worth having, not a title, not a fortune, but a man. His first stop was White's, where he found Lord Grenville, Octavia's father, taking his breakfast in splendid solitude. The Earl looked up as Julian approached, and something knowing flickered in his grey eyes, the same grey as his daughter's. "Ashbourne," Grenville said mildly, "I heard you had an interesting evening at Pemberton House. Lady Felicity has been most vocal about your indiscretion." Julian took the seat across from him without invitation. "I need your permission to court your daughter, sir." Grenville's eyebrows rose. "My daughter is currently being courted by Sir Philip Davenport, a fine man, steady, sensible, not prone to dramatic revelations in libraries. I love her, sir." "Since when?" The question was sharp. "Since last evening, when you saw another man paying her attention, or since some time before, when you were content to call her your sister and ignore her entirely?" The words stung, because they were true. Julian met Grenville's gaze directly. "I do not know the exact moment I fell in love with Octavia, sir. Perhaps I always have been, but I know that I have been a coward about it for 10 years. And I know that she deserves better than a man who only realized her worth when faced with losing her. But I also know that I'm going to become that better man, whether she chooses me or not." Grenville studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed. "She cried last night. For the first time since her mother died, I heard my daughter crying in her room. Do you know what that does to a father? To hear your child in pain and know you cannot fix it. I know I caused that pain, sir, and I will spend the rest of my life attempting to atone for it." "Philip Davenport is a good man," Grenville said again. "He will not hurt her, will not take her for granted, will not suddenly realize 10 years hence that he should have been paying attention all along. No, sir, he will not. Because he already sees her clearly, already knows her worth." Julian's voice dropped. "But he is not me. And I am not asking you to deny her happiness with him. I am simply asking for the chance to prove I can offer her happiness with me. Real happiness. Not the comfortable friendship we had, but something more. Something she deserves." Grenville was silent for another long moment. Then he smiled, a small, sad smile. "She loved you for 10 years, boy. 10 years she watched you court other women, watched you treat her like a pleasant piece of furniture, and she never complained, never made you uncomfortable with her feelings. She simply endured. Do you have any idea how much strength that took? How much pain she bore in silence? I am beginning to understand it, sir." "Good." Grenville leaned back in his chair. "Then understand this as well. I will not forbid you to court my daughter, but I will also not encourage her to choose you. That decision is hers alone, and if she chooses Philip, you will accept it with grace and dignity. You will not make this harder for her than it already is. "I give you my word, sir." "Then you have my permission to try." "But Ashbourne?" Grenville's voice hardened. "If you hurt her again, title or no title, I will call you out myself. Duke or dustman, I do not care. She is my daughter, and she has suffered enough." Julian left White's with Grenville's warning ringing in his ears and his resolve stronger than ever. He returned to Ashbourne House and immediately penned 2 letters. The first was to his mother, explaining that there would be no engagement to Lady Felicity and that he intended to court Miss Octavia Sinclair properly. The Dowager Duchess would be surprised, possibly even disappointed, but she would understand. She had always liked Octavia. The second letter was to Octavia herself. He wrote it 3 times before he was satisfied, each version more honest than the last. In the end, he settled on simplicity. "My dearest Octavia," he wrote, "I do not ask you to forgive me. I do not ask you to love me still, if indeed you ever did. I ask only for the chance to show you through action rather than words that I see you, that I have always seen you, even when I was too much of a coward to admit it. I ask for the chance to be worthy of you. However long that takes, whatever that requires, yours if you will have me, Julian." He sent the letter that afternoon, and then he waited. The reply came 3 days later. 3 days during which Julian existed in a state of suspended agony, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to do anything but replay every moment of their friendship and catalogue his failures. Octavia's handwriting was as familiar as his own. He had seen it on book recommendations, on witty marginalia in borrowed volumes, on notes slipped into his coat pocket at boring social events. Now he saw it on a letter that would determine the course of his entire life. "Julian," she had written, "your letter moved me more than I can express, but pretty words on paper are easy. You have always been good with words, charming with your declarations. I need more than that. I need to know that this is real. That you are not simply reacting to the loss of something comfortable. I am not a possession to be reclaimed when another man shows interest. I am a person, a woman who has needs and desires and dreams that have nothing to do with being your convenient companion. If you want to court me, truly court me, not as a friend but as a man courts a woman he intends to marry, then you must prove it. Not with grand gestures, not with passionate speeches, but with patience, with consistency, with the daily unglamorous work of showing me I matter. Do that, and we shall see what future we might build together. Octavia." Julian read the letter 12 times. Then he smiled, the first genuine smile he had managed in 3 days. She had not said yes, but she had not said no. And that for now was enough. The first 30 days were a silent agony. Each morning, Julian woke with the same physical ache in his chest, the same awareness that Octavia was out there in the world, potentially building a life with another man while he attempted to prove himself worthy of consideration. The second month became a marathon of self-control. Julian courted Octavia with a determination that astonished London society, but more importantly, with a restraint that surprised even himself. He appeared at every event he knew she would attend, not to claim her dances or monopolize her time. Sir Philip still did that, and Julian forced himself to step back and let it happen. Instead, he simply made certain she saw him, made certain she knew he was there. He sent her books, not expensive volumes chosen to impress, but specific editions he knew she had mentioned wanting. A newly published volume of Byron's poetry, which she had mentioned admiring for its emotional honesty. A handsomely bound translation of Virgil's Georgics with scholarly annotations that he knew would delight her. A recent volume of Humphrey Davy's lectures on chemistry that had caused quite a stir in scientific circles. Octavia had always been fascinated by natural philosophy. He did not include notes with these gifts, did not ask for acknowledgement or gratitude. He sent them weekly because they would make her happy, because her happiness was becoming more important to him than his own. He attended lectures at the Royal Institution that he knew she would be at. The institution's popular science lectures were one of the few venues where women of intellect were welcomed and even encouraged. He sat 3 rows behind her and never approached, simply listened to the same speakers. learned about the same discoveries, shared the same intellectual space without demanding her attention. Once he saw her at the British Museum, not merely reading but actively debating with one of the curators about the provenance of the new collection of Elgin marbles. She stood before the massive sculptures, her small frame dwarfed by the ancient stone, but her voice was clear and confident as she challenged the curator's attribution of one particular frieze. "But surely the stylistic elements suggest a later period," she was saying, her finger tracing the air as if outlining invisible forms. "The musculature here is far more naturalistic than what we see in the earlier Parthenon friezes. And if one considers the historical context of the workshop practices, the curator, a man twice her age and considerably more condescending in his initial demeanor, had stopped attempting to dismiss her. He was listening, actually listening, leaning forward with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, treating her as an intellectual equal. Her passion, her sharp intellect, her refusal to be dismissed simply because she was female. Julian felt such profound pride watching her that his chest ached. This was her value, this brilliant mind, this fearless engagement with ideas. Something the beautiful, accomplished Lady Felicity could never have offered him. Felicity would have simpered prettily and agreed with whatever the curator said, more concerned with appearing agreeable than being right. Octavia did not care about appearing agreeable. She cared about truth, about understanding, about the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. And in that moment, standing in the shadows of the British Museum, while she argued about ancient Greek sculpture with the passion of a scholar, Julian felt a shiver of desire course through him. Her intellect did not make her less of a woman. It made her the only woman he truly wanted. The passion in her voice was more seductive than the most elaborate dance, more alluring than any practiced coquetry. He did not approach, did not interrupt, simply watched, memorizing every gesture, every expression, every moment of this woman being entirely herself in a world that often demanded she be less. When she finally noticed him, standing at a respectful distance, she blushed, but she also smiled. A small smile, guarded but genuine. Progress. He stopped attending balls unless Octavia would be there, stopped accepting invitations to parties and drawing rooms. His mother commented on his suddenly subdued social life with something between amusement and approval. "So you have finally realized what the rest of us have known for years," the Dowager Duchess said one evening over dinner at Ashbourne House, "that you love Octavia Sinclair and have been utterly insufferable in your refusal to admit it." Julian looked up from his untouched pheasant. "You knew?" "Darling boy, everyone knew, except you and apparently the poor girl herself. Why do you think I never pressured you to marry? I kept hoping you would wake up and see what was right in front of you. Lady Felicity was a symptom of your panic. You knew Octavia was considering Sir Philip's suit. You knew you were losing her. So you did what cowards do. You ran in the opposite direction and called it logic." His mother took a sip of her wine. "I am glad you came to your senses, even if you did so in the most dramatic fashion possible." "She may choose Philip," Julian said quietly, "and if she does, then you will accept it, and you will be happy for her because you love her enough to want her happiness, even if it is not with you." His mother reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "But I do not think she will choose Philip. Comfortable as he might be, safe as he might seem, he is not you. And she has loved you for too long to settle for safe when she could have passionate." "I do not want her to choose me out of passion," Julian said. "I want her to choose me because she knows, truly knows that I see her, that I value her, that I love her for who she is, not for who I need her to be." "Then show her," his mother said simply. "Every day, in every way, until she cannot doubt it any longer." So Julian did. When Octavia mentioned in passing at a garden party that she had always wanted to learn to ride better, but felt self-conscious practicing at Rotten Row where everyone could watch, Julian arranged for her to use the private grounds at Ashbourne Abbey. He did not accompany her, did not intrude, simply made his groom available and ensured she had access to the gentlest mare in his stables. When he overheard her telling Lady Grenville that she wished there were more comfortable seating at the Royal Institution lectures, he anonymously donated funds for new chairs. When she commented that she wished Hyde Park had a quiet reading area, He persuaded the park committee to install benches in a secluded corner near the Serpentine. He learned the rhythm of her days, knew when she took her morning walks, when she visited the British Museum, when she preferred to be alone. And he respected those times. He did not ambush her with his presence or demand acknowledgement of his efforts. He simply loved her, quietly, consistently, with a patience he had never known he possessed. And slowly, so slowly he barely dared to hope, something shifted in the way Octavia looked at him. It was not a dramatic change. There were no tearful reconciliations or passionate declarations. But when their eyes met across a ballroom, she no longer looked away immediately. When he sent her a book, she began sending brief notes of thanks. When they encountered each other at lectures or museums, she allowed him to walk with her for a few moments, discussing what they had learned. Baby steps, careful rebuilding of trust, the patient, unglamorous work of showing someone they mattered. It was the hardest thing Julian had ever done, harder than assuming his title at 18, harder than managing his estates or navigating Parliament. Because this required him to be vulnerable, required him to offer his heart without any guarantee it would be accepted. But Octavia was worth it. She had always been worth it. 2 months after that terrible night at Pemberton House, Julian received a note in Octavia's handwriting. His hands shook as he opened it. "Julian," it read, "my father is hosting a small dinner party tomorrow evening. Intimate, just family and close friends. He has asked me to invite you. If you are available and interested, we dine at 7. Octavia." Julian read the note 17 times. Then he wrote his acceptance before he could question what this meant, or hope too much that it meant anything at all. The dinner at Grenville House was exactly as advertised. Intimate, comfortable, filled with people who had known each other for years. Julian's mother was there, looking pleased. Lord and Lady Grenville presided with easy warmth. Octavia's younger brother Edward, home from Cambridge, regaled them with stories of undergraduate life, and Sir Philip Davenport was absent. Julian tried not to read too much into that absence, tried not to let hope bloom too bright in his chest. But when Octavia smiled at him across the dinner table, a real smile, unguarded and genuine, he felt something shift in the region of his heart. After dinner, as the men were preparing to join the ladies in the drawing room, Lord Grenville caught Julian's arm. "A word, if you please, Ashbourne." They stepped into the library. Of course it was a library, Julian thought with dark amusement. Every significant moment of his life recently had occurred in a library. Perhaps it was fitting that his fate would be decided in one as well. "Sir Philip Davenport called upon me yesterday," Grenville said without preamble. "He asked my permission to marry Octavia. I told him I could not give it without speaking to my daughter first." Julian's heart stopped, then started again, beating painfully against his ribs. "And what did she say?" "She said no." Grenville smiled slightly. Kindly, gently but definitively, she told Philip that she cared for him, respected him, was grateful for his attention, but that she could not marry him because her heart was already given. Had been given for years to a fool who had only recently come to his senses. Grenville paused, his expression growing more serious. "Philip is a good man, Julian. A genuinely good man. And I regret having been the bearer of news that caused him pain, but he is mature enough to understand that one cannot compete with a history that spans an entire lifetime, however poorly one of the participants has lived that history for the majority of it." The world tilted. Julian gripped the back of a chair to steady himself. "She said that?" "She did, though I believe she used more diplomatic language." Grenville's expression grew serious. "My daughter is giving you another chance, Ashbourne. Not because you suddenly realized her worth, not because you were jealous, but because you proved over these past 2 months that you were willing to work for her, that you were willing to be patient, that you valued her enough to let her make her own choices without pressure or manipulation. Sir, do not disappoint her," Grenville continued quietly. "Do not take this second chance for granted, because if you do, I promise you, there will not be a third." "I give you my word," Julian said hoarsely. "On my honor, on my title, on everything I hold dear, I will spend the rest of my life cherishing your daughter the way she deserves." the way she has always deserved. Grenville nodded. Then I suggest you join us in the drawing room. I believe my daughter is waiting to speak with you. Julian entered the drawing room to find Octavia standing by the window, looking out at the darkened garden. The evening light caught in her brown hair, turning the strands to bronze and amber. She had changed for dinner into a gown of deep blue silk that brought out the grey of her eyes, and he wondered, not for the first time, how he had ever thought her plain. She was beautiful, had always been beautiful. He had simply been too cowardly to see it, or perhaps he had seen it and called it by other names: comfortable, familiar, safe, words that diminished what he felt, made it manageable, contained it within boundaries he could control. But there was nothing safe about the way his heart raced when she turned to face him, nothing comfortable about the fear that she might still choose to walk away. "Octavia," he said quietly. She turned, and he saw nervousness in her grey eyes. Nervousness and hope and something that looked very much like love. But there was also caution there, a wariness born of 10 years of disappointment. She was not going to make this easy for him, and he was grateful for that, because easy would mean she had not learned to value herself. Easy would mean she was still the girl who waited in silence while he broke her heart again and again. "Julian, Father said you two had spoken." The formality in her voice, Julian, not the familiar diminutive she had used for years, was like a small blade between his ribs. He had lost the right to that intimacy, would have to earn it back, word by word, day by day. "He told me you refused, Sir Philip." Julian took a step closer, then stopped, giving her space, respecting her boundaries in a way he had never bothered to do before, when he had assumed her presence in his life was guaranteed. "Octavia, I need you to know that I am not asking you to choose me out of old affection or habit, or because you have loved me for so long that you do not know how to stop. I am asking you to choose me because you believe I can make you happy, because you trust that I see you clearly now, because you think we could build something real together." She was quiet for a moment, and in that silence Julian heard all his failures echoing back to him. Every time he had called her sister when she longed to be something more. Every ball where he had danced with other women while she sat with the chaperones. Every conversation where he had sought her advice about courting other ladies, using her knowledge of his heart against her own. "I think," Octavia said slowly, her voice carefully controlled, "that you have spent 2 months showing me exactly that. Not telling me, not promising me, but showing me, through actions, through patience, through respecting my choices even when they hurt you." She took a step toward him, and he saw her hands trembling slightly. She clasped them together, a gesture he recognized from childhood, Octavia steadying herself, gathering her courage to speak a difficult truth. "I think you have been working very hard to prove something you do not actually need to prove. Because, Julian, I never stopped loving you, even when I wanted to, even when it would have been easier, even when loving you felt like slowly bleeding out in a room full of people who refused to notice." Her voice broke slightly on the last words, and Julian felt something crack open in his chest. The casual cruelty of his ignorance, no, not ignorance, his willful blindness, had done this to her. Had taken this brilliant, generous, loving woman and made her feel invisible. "I knew," Julian said quietly, the admission he should have made 10 years ago. "Some part of me always knew. I saw it in the way you looked at me when you thought I was not paying attention, in the way you always saved a dance for me, even when you had other partners waiting, in the way you remembered every small detail of my life, every preference, every fear, every dream. And I was a coward. I used the label sister as armor against my own feelings, used your constancy as a safety net while I pretended to search for something better. When there was nothing better, there was only you. There has only ever been you." Octavia smiled, that brilliant, unguarded smile he had been working so hard to earn. But there were tears on her cheeks, and he understood that they were not entirely tears of happiness. They were tears for all the wasted years, all the unnecessary pain, all the time they could have had together if he had only been brave enough to claim her sooner. "Then stop standing all the way over there, you foolish man," she whispered, "and come kiss me." Julian crossed the room in 3 strides. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing the familiar lines of her cheekbones, and looked into her eyes, really looked, the way he should have been looking for 10 years. "I love you," he said. "I love your brilliant mind and your generous heart and your terrible jokes about Greek philosophy. I love that you hate the opera but go anyway because you like watching people more than you like music. I love that you take sugar in your tea but never milk, that you read with your nose 3 inches from the page even with your spectacles on, that you are the kindest, strongest, most remarkable person I have ever known. I love you, Octavia Sinclair, and I am sorry it took me so long to say it." "Then stop talking," she whispered, "and kiss me already." So he did, and it was nothing like he had imagined during those tortured weeks of courting her from a distance. It was not smooth or practiced or controlled. It was urgent and clumsy and perfect. 10 years of suppressed feeling finally given expression. She tasted like the lemon tarts she had been eating at dinner, and she smelled like the lavender soap she had used since they were children, and she fit in his arms like she had been designed specifically for this purpose. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Octavia was laughing. That real laugh, the one he loved most. "Well," she said, "that was worth waiting 10 years for." "I will spend the rest of our lives making up for those 10 years, Julian promised, "starting now." He sank to one knee, ignoring her startled gasp. He did not have a ring. He would take her to choose one tomorrow, would let her select exactly what she wanted, rather than imposing his taste on her. But he took her hand, his thumb brushing across the soft skin of her palm, and pressed his ducal signet ring against it for a brief moment. A temporary symbol, heavy with his identity and his complete surrender. "You will choose tomorrow," he said softly. "Whatever you desire." Then he began his vows. "Octavia Sinclair," he said, "you have been my best friend since we were children. You have known me at my worst and still chosen to stand beside me. You have loved me when I did not deserve it and waited with a patience I certainly did not earn. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Not because society expects it, not because we have known each other forever, but because I love you with my whole heart, and I cannot imagine living the rest of my life without you." Octavia looked down at him, and tears were streaming freely down her face. Happy tears this time. "Get up, you impossible man," she said, laughing through her tears. "Of course I will marry you, of course, yes. 1,000 times yes." Julian rose and kissed her again, and this time, when the drawing-room door opened and their families peered in, neither of them cared. Let them watch. Let all of London watch. He had spent too many years hiding his feelings, pretending Octavia was just a friend, just a sister, just a comfortable habit. She was none of those things. She was everything, and he was going to spend the rest of his life making certain the whole world knew it. The scandal Lady Felicity had predicted never materialized, or rather it did, but not the way she had expected. London society whispered and gossiped and speculated, but the general consensus was that the Duke of Ashbourne and Miss Octavia Sinclair had always been destined for each other. How romantic, the Ton declared, that childhood friends had finally admitted their love. How perfect that they had known each other so long and so well. No one seemed to remember the years they had spent calling Octavia plain and predicting she would die a spinster. Or if they did remember, they wisely kept those opinions to themselves. Lady Felicity married an earl's son 6 months later and reportedly declared herself well rid of the Duke of Ashbourne and his eccentric taste in women. Julian and Octavia sent a generous wedding gift and wished her every happiness. They were married in October, in a small ceremony at the chapel on the Grenville estate. The morning had dawned cold and clear, with mist rising from the parkland and the scent of wood smoke drifting from the estate cottages. The chapel itself was hundreds of years old, built of honey-colored stone that glowed in the autumn sunlight, streaming through the beautifully restored Gothic-style stained glass windows, typical of the current fascination with the medieval era. Octavia wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame. The ivory silk, though decades old, had been perfectly preserved, and as she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Julian thought he had never seen anything more beautiful. The gown was simple by modern standards, no elaborate embroidery or excessive ornamentation, but it suited her perfectly. A wreath of late roses and autumn leaves crowned her hair, which had been left partially loose in soft waves rather than pinned up in the elaborate style fashion dictated. She was not trying to be someone she was not performing the role of perfect bride for society's approval. She was simply Octavia, the woman he loved coming to him at last. Her father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and Julian understood those tears. Grenville was not losing a daughter, so much as entrusting her to someone who had already failed her once. The weight of that trust, the responsibility of earning it back every single day, settled on Julian's shoulders like a mantle heavier than any duke's coronet. Julian's mother wept openly through the entire ceremony, her tears a mixture of joy and relief. She had waited years for this moment, had watched her son stumble through a dozen inappropriate courtships, and had known all along where his heart truly lay. And when Julian said his vows, promised to love and cherish and honor this woman for the rest of his days, he meant every word with an intensity that still sometimes surprised him. The vicar's voice seemed to fade into background noise as Julian looked into Octavia's eyes and saw his entire future there. Not the future he had planned, not the perfect ducal marriage society expected, but something infinitely better. A partnership, a true union of equals. How had he lived 30 years without recognizing this feeling? How had he mistaken comfort for mere friendship when it was actually the deepest form of love? Their wedding night was spent not in passionate urgency, but in tender exploration, learning each other in this new context. Every touch was a revelation, every kiss a promise. This was not just lovemaking, it was a conversation they had been having their entire lives, finally given physical expression. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the massive bed at Ashbourne Abbey, and Octavia traced idle patterns on his chest. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving up Lady Felicity and everything she represented? The perfect Duchess, the perfect life?" Julian caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "I regret nothing, except the years I wasted being blind. You are the perfect Duchess, Octavia, because you are perfect for me. Everything else, society, expectations, what people think I should want, none of it matters. Only you matter. Only this." She smiled against his chest. "Even though I am plain, even though I read too much and talk about philosophy at dinner parties, and will probably embarrass you at least once a week." "You are not plain," Julian said fiercely. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever known, inside and out. And you will never embarrass me. You might make me think, which is something I probably need, but embarrass never." "Liar," she said affectionately, "but I love you anyway." "I love you too," he replied, "more than I knew it was possible to love anyone. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for giving me time to catch up to what my heart always knew." "Thank you for finally seeing me," Octavia whispered. "Really, seeing me." "I always saw you," Julian corrected gently. "I was just too much of a coward to admit what I was seeing. But never again, Livy, I promise you, never again." 6 months later, on a spring morning bright with new leaves and birdsong, Julian found his wife in the library at Ashbourne House. She was sitting in the window seat, their favorite spot, with a book open in her lap and one hand resting on her swollen belly. She looked up as he entered, and her smile, that smile he had waited so many years to truly see, made his heart stutter in his chest. "Good morning, Your Grace," she said teasingly. "Have you come to hear me expound upon the merits of Cicero, or are you here to tell me that sitting in uncomfortable positions is bad for the baby?" "Neither," Julian said, crossing to the window seat and sitting beside her. He placed his hand over hers, feeling the subtle flutter of movement beneath. Their child. The physical manifestation of a love that had taken too long to recognize, but had been worth every moment of waiting. "I came to tell you that I love you." "You told me that at breakfast," Octavia pointed out. "And again after breakfast, and then once more before I came to the library. And I will tell you again at luncheon and at dinner and before we sleep tonight." He kissed her softly. "I wasted 10 years not saying it, Livy. I'm making up for lost time." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat together in comfortable silence. The silence of two people who no longer needed words to communicate. Outside the window, the gardens of Ashbourne House bloomed in riotous color. Inside the library, surrounded by books and memories and the promise of their future, Julian Montclair, Duke of Ashbourne, held his wife and his child and knew he had finally found what he had been searching for all along. It had not been in perfect Lady Felicity with her golden hair and social graces. It had not been in his title, or his fortune, or his position. It had been here, in this woman he had known his entire life, this woman who knew all his flaws and loved him anyway, this woman who had waited with infinite patience for him to stop being a fool. Home had never been a place. It had always been a person, and he had finally been brave enough to claim her. "Julian," Octavia said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Hmm? Stop thinking so loudly. You are disturbing my reading." Julian laughed, the deep, genuine laugh that only she could pull from him, and kissed the top of her head. "My apologies, Your Grace. I shall endeavor to think more quietly." "See that you do," she said primly. Then she smiled, that brilliant smile that was his alone, and added softly, "I love you too, you foolish, wonderful man. Always have. Always will." And in that moment, with spring light streaming through the window and Octavia warm in his arms and their child growing beneath her heart, Julian knew with absolute certainty that he was the luckiest man in England. Not because of his title, not because of his wealth, but because he had finally learned to see what had always been right in front of him. Love, real love, did not announce itself with trumpets and fanfares. It grew quietly, patiently, in the space between moments. In shared books and stolen glances and comfortable silences, in knowing someone so well that their happiness became more important than your own. It had taken him 30 years to understand that. But now that he did, he would never forget it again. Dear listener, sometimes the greatest love of your life is hiding in plain sight. Like Julian, you may be looking everywhere except the one place that matters most. You may be chasing after what society says you should want, while missing what your heart has always known. True love does not always announce itself with dramatic gestures or instant recognition. Sometimes it grows quietly beside you, waiting patiently for you to stop running and simply turn around. The person who has been there through every triumph and every failure, who knows you at your worst and stays anyway, that person might be showing you love in ways you have not yet learned to see. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, consider this. Who has been standing beside you all along? Who knows you completely and still chooses you? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop searching for perfect and start seeing the precious. You deserve a love that sees you clearly, and perhaps you already have it if only you will open your eyes. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If this story of love hidden in plain sight touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue creating stories of love, courage, and second chances.